Welcome back to Honda Garage Idaho. In today's video, we're going to be talking about seats in my 2011 CRZ. Specifically, we're switching away from the gray cloth seats that came factory and attempting to install 8th Gen Civic Si seats. So let's get started. Now, you might be asking yourself, why go with OEM seats when there's so many aftermarket options? And yes, you can definitely find aftermarket seat rails, aftermarket bucket seats of all shapes and sizes, harnesses, whatever you'd like to do. But for me, I'm trying to keep my build more OEM plus, and I have an 8th Gen Civic Si drivetrain under the hood. So I thought I'd pay homage to the K-swap that I did and stick with the black interior theme that I've been working on with parts from a 2013 interior to tie it all together. So for me, it's more about the style and the OEM plus nature of the system, and I just want to see if it can be done. Plus, I got a pair of these out of a wrecked 06 Civic Coupe from my local junkyard at a killer price, so, I mean, why not? Now, as always, if you're servicing anything relating to the airbag system, make sure your battery is not only disconnected, but that you let it sit for at least 10 minutes so that any residual charge in the vehicle systems can drain away before you start modifying any of the electronics in the SRS system. Removing the factory seats is quite simple. We've got 4 14mm bolts, one on each corner. These front two are on an angled bit of the bracket here, easy to access. And with the seat slid all the way forward, we can see our third bolt and the fourth one under this Velcro cover. Don't forget to disconnect your wiring under here before you pull your seats out. The two white plugs have a tab on top that can be depressed to unlock them. That one and this one. Like so. This goes for driver and passenger side. And our airbag one, we're going to slide this black plastic backward until it releases itself from the connector. Alright, I'm going to start off with the passenger seat here actually, because this one should be slightly easier, believe it or not, at least from what I can tell. We've just got a few plugs underneath here. We've got seatbelt, airbag, passenger weight sensors, occupancy sensors, and the angled front feet that sit right down on the CRZ frame. And on the Civic seats, instead of angled, we have vertical front feet. The rears are also flat, but I think they're spaced slightly differently. And we have 4 plugs on the bottom of the Civic seat, and I'll get to that in a bit, what I'm planning to do for the wiring. My SI seats came out of a coupe, which means the passenger side one does not have a spot for the seat belt right here. But on the CRZ and the SI sedan seats, we do have a spot for the seat belt to bolt in. I did see on the Civic Si seat rail as well, we do actually have a spot independent of the seat itself that the original bolt for my CRZ seatbelt can thread into. I will have to get a shorter one if this is where I end up attaching the belt, because it'll hit the rail fairly quickly, but could be where the original one attaches in the coupe. Not exactly sure, but that may work for us. So my original plan with this passenger seat was to unbolt these silver bolts on the sides of the rails and drop those down off the sliders using these custom 10-point sockets that I found for Honda seats. However, even after removing those bolts, it turned out that the passenger weight sensors were still attached with this larger one down in the center. So that wasn't really going to be an option. But I did look in the service manual and discover that there are 6 Torx bolts that hold more of the rail onto the slider. So I'm going to remove those instead and replace them with the CRZ passenger rails, which unbolt the same way. So at this point, with those 6 torque bolts attached, our lower rails and feet are disconnected. We just have the wiring for the passenger sensors left attached. We've got 4 plugs on my Civic seat, at least the coupe version. Again, I'm going to be referencing the coupe a lot through this video, and I don't know if it's different for the sedan. These 2 plugs here, we've got a single yellow one and a white one with 3 pins. Both of these appear to go to my seatbelt harness, so this is all seatbelt here. Then we've got our 4-pin plug with 3 populated pins, and that is for the passenger occupancy sensors right here, this little sub harness. Finally, this yellow plug up here with 4 pins, only 2 of which are populated, and that is going to be the airbag harness, I believe. Back over to my CRZ passenger seat, we have another yellow airbag plug with 2 out of the 4 pins populated. We also have a 4-pin white plug with 3 pins populated, which is also going to our occupancy harness here, albeit different sub-harnesses. And finally, this single blue plug, which appears to be going to my seatbelt, and there is not an accompanying yellow plug for this one. So what I'm going to do for both of these seats, since the occupancy sensor harness runs not only to the front of the chassis, but is also tied into this one that goes into the seat back, I'm actually going to disconnect each sensor here at this spot. So I'm going to keep using the sensors from the CRZ rails, but it will be using the harness from the Civic seats. Now, these plugs are not too difficult to pull out. I did cut the little zip ties that are holding them tight onto the sensors, and then all we need to do is insert a little pick or flathead screwdriver in here, depress this tab right here, and the connector can pull straight out. Just like so. And we'll see on both of these harnesses, the red wire is on the left side. So I'm thinking the compatibility should be just fine, and the plugs are the same with the pins in the same location. On both seats, the harnesses also clip to the metal cross member, and it's just 2 tabs, one on each side to depress inward to separate them. I'll show you on the CRZ one. Push this one in, and this one on the bottom. Once those are both pressed in, it just pops through. Now the rails, at least to me visually, are a very close match between the CRZ passenger seat shown here and the Civic Coupe passenger seat that I have. So I'm going to attempt to remove them and just directly swap them. We've got one Torx bolt on the front, a T27 I believe on both sides, and if we slide the rails all the way backward and look in here, we can also see 2 more Torx screws going straight down. Let's remove all 6 of those. Alright, so here are both of the seat rails pulled off. Sorry, it's kind of hard to see against the carpet, but this is our stock CRZ rail. So again, we're keeping the CRZ sensors along with the rail. You can see we've got the angled feet on the front and everything, so this will bolt to our chassis just fine. And here's the Civic ones that we won't be reusing, so we don't have to worry about sensor incompatibility or reprogramming. Now I'm just holding the CRZ rail up here to mock this up. You can see with this lined up on the front, we've got our threaded holes in the back lined up perfectly. The only issue to getting these to fit is this slot on the CRZ rail where it's supposed to mate with the seat. On the Civic seat, we have this large pin or rivet here that's fully round. On the CRZ seat, we actually have a bent tab of metal, and that is rectangular. So what ends up happening is that the hole on the CRZ spot where this is supposed to thread into is actually slightly too small to fit over the head here. So I'm going to have to grind that down a bit so we can get this on. Alright, so if you can see there, I've ground off just a bit on each side to make it flat. That'll fit in the gap. And I also actually ground off a little bit on the inside here. So it's not circular on the inside anymore. There's a flat spot there so that it will fit in the smaller, narrower slots on the CRZ rails. But now I have a different problem. If we actually install and line these up, get the bottom one installed, we can see that slides in all the way up to the front, no problem. However, if we go to install our top rail, it's just not quite wide enough, and we can kind of rotate it here and get the top one to sort of reach if we stretch it, but then the bottom side is all out of whack. So my plan is to disconnect this center bar from the CRZ and use the Civic one instead. It may be a bit longer, but it also has slotted holes here to give it some adjustment. So we're going to pull the center bar off the Civic one, use that on the CRZ rails, and see if that gives us the proper reach for all the bolts to line up. Will that affect mounting this to the chassis? I am not 100% sure. These holes are a bit oversized on the mounts, so hopefully that'll give us enough play. If not, we can drill them out a little bit farther. Just your typical 10mm bolt on these, easy peasy. With that Civic crossbar on, we are able to get both feet mounted up, pushed forward, and keep them aligned. So I'm going to go ahead and throw those 6 Torx bolts back in and get the wiring done. Now I've got the seats flipped over. These are still the passenger seats because I also want to swap over these seat belts. So I'm going to take my CRZ one, unbolt it here, and remove the harness and pigtail, and put it on the Civic seat so that it's still plug and play. And again, just trying to keep all my CRZ sensors intact as much as possible to minimize the risk of having to recode anything. 14mm bolt to remove for this. Like I showed earlier, we do have 2 plugs for this seatbelt. The plastic clips for these were kind of a pain to get out. I ended up kind of prying the plugs off the clips separately and then digging one out of the frame. With that wire harness passed out through the seat, this is ready to go. Similar story for our CRZ belt. Disconnect the blue plug here from the chassis, feed it out from underneath the seat. On this one, we're gonna pull up this clip here to loosen the cloth, and this little one here as well. With those clips pulled out of the way, we can see that there's 2 spots where this harness is secured to the metal frame, and then of course just one 14mm bolt to remove the actual seatbelt. CRZ seatbelt fits great on the Civic one, even the metal alignment tab still fits in that slot. And we're just going to route our wiring harness through the same gap the other plugs came through, so we can bring this out and clip it into the spot on the frame we removed the other plug from. So let's recap on the Civic seat one more time before I try to put it in the car. We've got our Civic Si seat from a Coupe, 2006. We've got our stock Civic airbag module still installed, still the original plug for that. We have our Civic wire harness for the passenger sensors traveling all the way here on both sides, there and there. That's plugged in and secure. We've got our OEM CRZ rails bolted to the Civic sliders, and I did reuse the Civic covers as well on these, on the fronts and this back side. We'll double check on the outside corner in just a minute. So CRZ rails bolted on, CRZ sensors still using the Civic harness, and the Civic center crossbeam. Finally, the CRZ OEM seatbelt and harness. So let's go ahead and see if this will fit in the vehicle and if it'll work. Full range of motion on both sliders. Doesn't seem like there's any collision issues with anything, so that's nice. And another nice thing about having the coupe seat that actually wasn't intentional when I was looking for it is that this was designed for a vehicle with small, hard-to-access back seats. So this lever is what flips the seat forward and automatically slides it all the way to the front for rear seat access. If I do a JDM rear seat conversion, that'll be nice to have. Alright, so with the seat in place and the bolts on the side closest to the center console, we can see that indeed, because of the slightly wider fitment of the Civic seat, these bolts are not going to fit. Now, the 2 ones closest to the outside of the vehicle, I have space to drill out to relocate those holes without any issue, and we have plenty of clearance on the car side as well, even once the plastic trim is reinstalled here and here, so that's what we're going to do. For the front mount, I ended up going for a slotted approach because this bit of the bracket here might interfere with the flange on the bolts, so I ended up making that just slotted all the way out and cutting off this part that might interfere. And for the back, it was just a simple extra hole drilled about a centimeter in, a little less than ½ an inch, so that should do it. Wiring's all going to plug back together, same as stock. Regarding the seatbelt, it does look like I'll be able to use this. I was mocking up with my broken plastic piece while I wait for my new one to arrive. And I think I will need a metal spacer in here to bring the seatbelt out just a bit to clear that plastic. But I'll update later in the video once my new parts get here. For now, that is the passenger seat installed in the CRZ, sitting no higher than stock using the factory rails with just a touch of modification. So far things are going great. Let's see what we can do with the driver's side. Now, while the Civic sedan and coupe driver's seat are the same, they are different from the passenger side in one critical way, and that is that the feet are riveted directly to our rails, and the rail assemblies are riveted to the seats, so there's no mechanical parts we can undo to easily swap these rails out. That's going to be a bit more work for us because we're going to have to drill out these rivets to remove the feet, and we're going to have to do the same for the CRZ. So I definitely recommend picking up a bunch of metal-rated drill bits and some high-capacity batteries because you're going to need it. My goal is still to do this without any welding or fabrication, so we're going to drill all the rivets out of both seats and try and swap our CRZ feet over to the Civic rails. Before we start drilling off the CRZ feet, it's also going to be helpful to measure the length from the front of the rail to the back of this front bracket, as well as the distance between these 2 brackets. This will help us make sure when we mount them on the Civic rails that everything is spaced correctly for the vehicle so it all bolts up right. Again, similar to the passenger side, the CRZ width is about 3/8 of an inch smaller than the Civic width. So we're going to have to probably drill out extended holes again in 2 of the brackets. To minimize the chance of getting metal, dust, or shards inside this rail where the greased sliders are supposed to be, instead of continuing to drill through the center of these rivets to get them out, I'm first going to try and use this tool that's actually for like popping ball joints out to see if I can just gently press them out of the rail to keep the inside clean. And that's why all the modifications that we're going to be doing for alignment are also going to be on the CRZ brackets themselves. I don't want to drill any new holes or even enlarge any of the original ones in this rail. On the back side of the seat, once you pull these 2 rivets out, there is an additional plate actually that sits inside the rail right here. Once you remove the rivets, this will just come out separately. Make sure to keep track of that. While that tool did work great on the rear bolts, it did not like the front ones so much, so I ended up just drilling those almost all the way through with a bit that was just barely smaller, and punching those out with a little screwdriver and mallet. So we'll be doing most of our modifications to the CRZ seat brackets, and this is a good time to take a look at the hardware I'm going to be using to install them. So for the rear brackets with the larger holes, I ordered these. These are actually 3/8 screws. These aren't metric, but these are ultra low profile head screws, and they're 3/8 of an inch long as well. And I got some low profile nuts to go with, so that's what we'll be using to mount the back feet with the larger holes. For the fronts with the smaller holes, I ordered these M6 bolts and low profile nuts. These also have the thin heads. For both front and rear, I found the shortest bolts I could find that had a large enough diameter to fit over the holes and had a low enough profile head to match the rivets that were originally in the rails, so nothing collides inside the mechanism. And the nuts should be low profile enough that they won't interfere with the floor. I'm going to have on screen all the parts I ordered from McMaster Carr for these specific things. And I'll also be using some thread locker to make sure that these don't vibrate out, back out over time. For the front feet, I'm going to start off mounting them to these 2 holes here. This is where my Civic feet originally mounted, but there's a 3rd hole back here, and that lines up okay with these 2 holes. However, on the rail that is closest to the driver's side door, I'm actually going to drill separate holes on the CRZ brackets a little bit out so that all of 4 of these holes will line up with the body. I'm not going to have to adjust any of those. So like I said, since the Civic rails are wider, these are going to need to be farther inside this way. So I'm going to drill 2 holes for my M6 here and here, what's on screen below the original 2 holes. Skipping ahead a bit, here is my final setup for the front brackets. This is the one closest to the center console, and here's the one by the outside of the vehicle. I did end up flipping these ones reversed. It was easier to get a wrench in here to access the nut on the inside and use an Allen key out here. This one is the way I originally intended. And I ran the sliders, no issues with clearance on that, so let's move on to the back. The rears on the CRZ take forever to drill out because they're so thick. Okay, so for the rear brackets, on the one closest to the outside of the vehicle, again, I re-drilled the holes about 1/2 inch to move the bracket inward, accounting for the Civic spacing. And you'll remember that we had these on the Civic rails. These popped off the inside, actually. And I did not reuse them for this installation, but it was a helpful template for drilling my new holes. So we've got the Civic ones back here. I ended up using on the bracket closest to the outside of the vehicle this large hole in the very back, and this smaller one with an M16 right here. Now on the bracket closest to the center console, I'm going to use both the larger ones here, and you can see I slotted this far one because I didn't drill in the right spot the first time. But we're going to use the 2 large bolts on the outside of this, and that should wrap it up. Here's that final setup for the rear. You can see those low profile bolts inside. Same with the bottom rail, the M6 and the large one. And those will let us still slide those rails all the way down without any interference. Just like the passenger side, we're also going to remove the factory Civic seatbelt and reuse the CRZ one. So once again, it's just a single 14mm bolt for that. 2 plugs on here, once again easy enough to pry off, and then we will use a screwdriver or something to wiggle this clip out of the way. Okay, with the seatbelt wired up, we've also got the Civic airbag there. The last thing is the front seat position sensor. Now, unfortunately, without a lot more drilling and hacking up of both seats, I can't see a way to easily extract the CRZ position sensor and move it over here. So we're going to use the Civic sensor and its plug, but I'm going to make a little adapter with one of these on the end so that it'll still plug and play with the CRZ harness for reversibility, which you know I love. Now, I totally forgot to shoot a clip of this adapter harness until after I'd reinstalled the seats in the vehicle, but here is the seat wire coming from the floor of the CRZ. So this is my factory style plug right here, and then this wire harness comes around, and this gray plug underneath here is what is plugging into my Civic harness. If you do want to make your own adapter, here's the part numbers for that gray female plug that plugs into the Civic seat, as well as the white male plug that connects to the chassis harness. So I think it's about time we get this in the car. In an incredibly miraculous feat that defies all known laws of science and physics today, I actually got this bolted in and all the brackets lined up on the first try. So I guess that just goes to show that measure twice, cut once is a real thing. But it's fully situated in here, mounted up, feels solid. So the last thing to do is, of course, check the airbag system, see if our electronics are all working together. Once again, plenty of clearance on the side, even with the plastics on both the seat and the vehicle. And even though with the brackets we put on, the seat is half an inch closer to the edge of the car, still plenty of room. Okay, with everything plugged in, we do have a few airbag codes here for the system. This one, OPDS, that is the passenger, the occupancy detection system. So we may have to pull the seat apart and the CRZ one and swap the modules. This weight sensors one I'm actually curious about since we did reuse the CRZ ones. I'm going to try and clear these and recalibrate the OPDS unit and see if that will get these to clear up. So I did try to run an OPDS calibration with my scan tool, and that did not clear the codes. So it looks like transplanting just the sensors from the CRZ rails and not using the actual OPDS module is not good enough. So we're going to take apart the seat back now. The OPDS module is located right in here. We're going to pull this off and get that out and reinstall it in our Civic seat. After flipping this hook up and out of the way, we can dig out these bits on the side with the zipper to remove the back cover. So here we have our seat back plastic. This is held in with a couple of push clips here and here, as well as another plastic hook here. Now we can see here it's only held in with one Phillips screw on either side. The other one is inside this wiring here. Now I've brought the Civic seat in here as well because we're going to start removing the back paneling here and disconnecting the OPDS stuff that comes in this seat. Mine was attached with 3 drywall screws for some reason in here, so ignore that, it's just a little bit busted and unconventional. To start off, we're actually going to disconnect the wiring down here as well as pulling off these elastic bands. Press those off the springs. Okay, so with those elastic bands removed, this theoretically will all still be connected together. So to remove this back plastic here, this plate, we have clips all the way around holding the rest of it in. And if I pry mine up a little bit here, we can actually see one of the clips inside there on the corner. Yep, right in there. So that is where our first 2 pry spots are going to be. There's one here, I believe one in the center, and one over on this same corner. And then just a bunch lined up and around the sides. So if you can get a couple of long flathead screwdrivers in there to pry with to help push that away from the frame of the seat, or a couple trim removal tools just to gently pop that plastic clip out of the metal without destroying the white plastic frame above it. Okay, so as I was trying to pull these clips out, they ended up kind of sliding backward out of the plastic before they actually popped down. So it may be easier just to sort of push the whole bottom of this plastic toward the top of the chair to help that along without breaking them. Now as we go farther along the side up here, popping more clips out, you'll see right here there is a plastic one that kind of hooks underneath the metal. That's not one that you can just pull straight out away. You'll actually have to reach in here and find it with your finger and pull it away from the frame like this manually so that it can slide up and out of the way. Here is what the inside of the back looks like to hopefully give you a good idea so you can know where the clips are before you start pulling them out. On the top of the seat, we actually have these three big arms. So the way that these attach toward the top of the headrest, these actually sit in here and rotate in underneath. So once you get everything else clipped out, you can just pull this away and snap it out. It's not hard. It looks like this white plastic trimmer on the sides that holds it together actually comes in two pieces. Mine's disconnected on this side right here. It doesn't look like it's broken. It will just need to be snapped back together. So there's just one of those pull tabs on either side that I pointed out, and then the two plastic clips down here. I'm going to try and re-secure this. All of these little spots right here are plastic welds that go between the bracketry here and some of the cloth, so don't necessarily worry about those. I'm going to try and patch mine up in a bit, but for now we have the back off the Civic seat, so let's dig into the wiring. Our OPDS module is once again located on the inside of the seat closest to the center of the vehicle, so to start we're going to remove these plastic hooks. You can basically grab and roll the fabric forward to give these enough slack to pop out. So here's our OPDS module, again similar story, mounted with two mounting points, one on the top and one on the bottom here behind the wiring. These Phillips screws on the CRZ module can be kind of a pain to start. I'm sure they're JIS and I'm just using a Phillips number 3 bit, but lay the chair on its side so you can really like force down onto it and get some torque. After taking a closer look at the wiring, the plugs are the exact same all the way across, and each particular sensor that's located in the top corners or at the base of the chair on the CRZ, those wire to the exact same spots on the Civic module. So as a classic car guy move, at the risk of costing myself a lot more money and time down the road, I am going to try and just use the CRZ module on the Civic sensors, and we'll see how it goes. Alright, so I traced the wires by color from here to that main plug, as well as the wire pairs from here and here going to our side rail sensors. Did the same thing on the CRZ side, and all the colors and particular parts went up to the same exact spots on this plug as they do on the CRZ. By the time we get down to here, where they're all entering the vehicle and the sensors, there's only 7 wires. So I'm not 100% sure what this one is for, this extra 8th one. It could just be an extra ground or maybe a shielding wire, not 100% sure. But I think I'm going to send it and see what happens. By the way, when you're unplugging all these connectors at once, you have one on this end and one here in the middle that are both the same style of 2-pin connector. The one that only has a single wire coming out of the top is going to be on the far edge. Keep that in mind so you don't get them mixed up. The flange nuts on the Civic seat are easy enough to remove with a 10mm wrench. So there's our Civic module out. Comparing the backs of the two modules, we can see that the mounting holes are a bit differently spaced from each other, so we are either going to have to drill a new hole in the CRZ mount, or what I think I'm actually going to do is pop the metal casing off of these, unscrew the PCB, I'm assuming that's what these 4 screws in the corner are holding in, and then I will swap the back plates from the one module to the other. It's easy enough to pop this case off using a flathead to just pry in between this gap and pull this so it comes past the little tabs on the inner metal, and then pushing it upward. Now the CRZ circuit board does share the same mounting holes as our Civic brackets, so we can just line those right back up and screw them in. Okay, so just to recap where we're at now, we're keeping the same wiring configuration here as I showed earlier in the video. We're keeping the same Civic sensors in the back of the seat. We've just replaced the circuit board in here, and in my case the top cover as well, with our CRZ OPDS module. So let's bolt it back up to our factory mount points here, and I think it's time to test this in the car again. Okay, battery positive is hooked back up. Let's try this out and see what we get. I'd love to see no airbag light come on. Option 2, it stays on, which is unfortunate because I'm running out of options. And of course, possibility 3, this blows up and hits me in the face. Okay, I think we're good. The light is staying off so far. My passenger airbag light is not blinking. So far so good. I think that solved it. So we're keeping the Civic sensors and just using the CRZ controller box for the OPDS. I'm gonna go ahead, pull the seat back out for just a minute and get all the cosmetic stuff put back on, all the plastic trim and everything, and then bolt it back up for the final time, but I think we're good to go. One extra note, if your seat happens to be kind of cracked up and busted like mine is, you can see all around this white bracket there's spots that are plastic welded through to little posts on the other side, and on my seat a bunch of them are broken off. So you can see here that it's just loose, no plastic left at all. And that was why my cloth and everything was super ragged. But it turns out that these little screws that I happen to have on hand are the perfect size. You can actually thread them into those posts without destroying anything or splitting them. And the head top is the right size to kind of squish down on that plastic and re-sandwich everything together really securely. So I'm just going to run around and put these screws in most of the seat. You can see I've already got them all across the bottom here where it was the worst. But I'm going to put them in a few more places just to be safe. Now when it comes time to reattach the back, you're definitely going to want to make sure that you kept these in good shape, these clips. You can replace them, Honda still sells them, they're quite cheap, but keep these ones intact if you can. It's kind of a pain to get them out if you can't. If you do need to, we can pull off these plastic hooks here and peel this cloth back. My recommendation, rather than trying to pop these out of the metal, because there's 2 layers in here and it's actually kind of difficult to get to the mounting tabs, would just be to buy a new pack and break these off, get the plastic out of there and just put fresh ones in. I'm going to try and reuse mine, maybe with the help of a little glue. If you do need to replace them, at least for my exact seat, this is the part number that you're going to need here. They come in a pack of 10, so you should have plenty to destroy and try again if you need to. Make sure going back in that all your wiring is hooked up. Also, don't forget to attach your seatbelt here. I ended up having to use about an inch worth of different spacers to get the CRZ seatbelt assembly to clear this trim wherever the seat slides. Okay, so there we have it. The SI seats are in. So I think that finally wraps up the install for the SI seats. It wasn't exactly 100% plug and play. It was a lot of work, more so than I was expecting, but at the end of the day, it's done. I'm super happy with the results, and I see several upsides to this rather than just getting aftermarket bucket seats and rails to adapt. For one thing, these don't sit any higher than the stock seats, which if you get aftermarket buckets with adapter rails and multiple things, they can actually end up sitting a little higher, which was not my thing. Another big pro of going this route is budget, especially if, like me, you're able to find a set of these super cheap. You don't need to do any fabrication, any welding, anything like that. It's just a few extra dollars for the miscellaneous hardware you're going to need. So this is a great way to get some more fun seats in here or a different style on kind of a lower budget. And, of course, the SRS system, all the electronics. Now, while it wasn't completely plug and play, we were able to reuse all the electronics that we had in the car. Nothing extra was required. And even though I did try to reprogram the Civic OPDS, at the end of the day we ended up using the CRZ one, and that did not require any reprogramming, so you will not need any fancy scan tools, you won't need to go to the dealership, and most importantly, the airbag system, at least as I've tested it so far, seems to be fully intact and functional. All in all, I'm super happy with this project. If you try it for yourself, maybe with a different year of seats or sedan seats or something like that, let me know how it goes in the comments. I hope all the information I had here today was super helpful for you. If there's any other questions, be sure to let me know. But that's about all I've got for this video, so stay tuned for the next one, and thank you so much for watching.